Good afternoon or good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, a new series on monthly, or I should say a new series that's going to happen monthly on different raw workflow techniques. And this month it's portraiture. So we have a look at quite a few things in Capture One that you can use to help you with your various different portrait work. So more on that in a second. If this is your first webinar and you don't know who you're listening to, my name's David. I'm part of the software sales team based out of Copenhagen in Denmark. As usual, we have 60-minute session today, and we'll probably be able to fill that just about perfectly, I would think. You're very welcome and encouraged to ask questions throughout. At the bottom of your GoToWebinar control panel, if you're on your Mac or PC, you'll see the last section is called questions, so put a question in there, that will come straight through to me. If you're on your iOS device or Android device, tap the question mark icon in the app itself and you can ask a question in the same way. I am recording this too, so don't feel you have to remember everything. You can pick it up on our YouTube channel at some point tomorrow with all the previous webinars as well. Look out for a follow-up email in the morning, which will point you in the right direction to that channel. So let us begin. I will just come out of Keynote and you should see Capture One on screen right now. Every now and then you might see the cursor highlighted like so, just to help you orientate where we are. Now I've tried to pick out a few different things portrait wise. So we've got some controlled light in the studio, we've got some natural light, we've got a more complex retouching job required, and also in a different folder here we've got some very handsome phase one employee corporate headshots where we look at something that we can do with cleaning up backgrounds in Capture One as well. So quite a few different things. Now some of them don't require much treatment, some of them require a bit more, which is why we dip in and out of Photoshop with this one here, and also this one over here. We will have a look at style, Capture One style, to see what else you can do with that scope as well. Okay, so enough of me waffling. So we've got the first image up here. This is straight out of camera, pretty much, I think it is. Yes, except for a crop. And that was just playing around with it yesterday. So this one is a nice simple one, a few different things that we can do in Capture One, and also the goal to try and avoid you having to go into Photoshop sometime as well. So first of all, there's no real hard and fast rules with what you should do first in Capture One in terms of which tool should you begin using, but it does make sense to have a look at levels, have a look at white balance, and have a look at exposure. There's no point starting to do color stuff and adjustments and things if it's underexposed. So really exposure, white balance, and levels are your first thing to go to. So with this image itself, I might choose to bump up exposure a tiny bit, manually set my shadow and highlight points, and then tweak up a little bit of the contrast as well, as it was just a little bit flat. So for base adjustments, that's great. First tip in working with portraits is in the curve tool itself. We've got various different options which you might have seen before if you've watched any of the previous webinars. Really good tip is to, if ever you want to adjust contrast and you want a bit more power than the slider itself, then choose the Luma Curve. And the reason for that is that the Luma Curve will give you a nice constant adjustment to contrast without affecting the color or the hue. So if I just illustrate that, I'll just do a dramatic RGB curve like so. And if you look at Alex's skin tone, you can see the saturation has gone up as well as the contrast going up. Doesn't look that great. But if we did the same over the top adjustment with the Luma Curve, you can see our skin tone is actually totally stable. So if you want to play with contrast and keep skin tone nice and constant, then Luma Curve is the way to go. Big difference. If you're not comfortable with using curves, then don't feel you can't use the contrast slider, because the effect of the contrast slider is kind of in between RGB and Luma. So if you push it hard, then you are going to see a little bit of a shift, but it's nowhere near as much as if you were to start futzing with RGB curves. So big difference there. But don't be afraid to use the contrast slider. Probably not that much, David. But if you want extra control from curves, always go for the Luma tab, so luminosity. All right, so that's some base adjustments dialed in. Now, a couple of issues that we've got to fix, well, 3. Exposure wise, we can see that it's a bit hot on the hat now that we've played with the contrast, but Alex's face looks pretty good. And also typically the underside of our arm is always a bit paler than the top of our arm. So that's catching a bit more light and is maybe a bit too hot and a bit too distracting. Now it's really easy to fix those. If you're lucky, you might be able to tweak highlights on high dynamic range to bring that down, but it does also affect anywhere else with those highlights, of course. So I don't really want to do that. I just want to control it nicely with a local adjustment. Now, local adjustments, if you haven't used them before, very useful in Capture One. I would recommend, if you don't know anything about local adjustments, is to go back a few weeks in the webinar archive and just watch that to get a basic introduction. But the basic premise is you draw a mask on the image, and then you can specifically only adjust those parts of the image. So in this case, we would mask the arm and we would mask the top of the hat just to take the exposure down a bit. So steps to do that, let's make a new layer and we just call this darken, as we're going to darken. Now currently there's no mask on the image, so if I start pulling sliders around, you see nothing is going to happen. So I could guess my adjustment and then brush it in. But what we can do is a neat little trick where we go up to the local adjustments tool and say Invert Mask, and that will give me a mask essentially over the whole image. Now I'm pressing M on the keyboard to show and hide you the mask in red, so the mask is effectively now the whole image. So now if I grab an adjustment, so I'm just going to pull the curve down a little bit. I don't want to drastically adjust it, but just a bit. And if I turn my layer on and off, you can see the effect that it's having to the front. If I want to combine that with a bit of highlight recovery, then I could do so as well. So now I've got 2 choices. I can either then just delete all the mask that I don't want to affect the image, but that's kind of a bit backwards. So I'll simply invert it back, like so. And now I can brush in my adjustment to where I want it to be on the image itself. If you want to shortcut Invert Mask, it will save you some time, and you can set that up in Edit Keyboard Shortcuts, Capture One, where are we, Other, and then you'll find Local Adjustments, and you've got various options for shortcuts for local adjustments. So certainly do that if you think this is something you're going to be doing a lot. Okay, so now we just need to grab our brush, right click, to get up brush settings. So let's make this a bit smaller. I'll keep it nice and soft so we have a really big feather on it. And flow wise, this might relate to your question, Alistair, is about reducing the opacity of an adjustment layer after you've applied it, which you can't do. So my best advice is to build up a mask in a nice slow and controlled way, and you do that by lowering the flow. So having a low flow means that when I pass the brush back and forth, let's just turn the mask off, then it builds up the correction in a nice slow and controlled way. So if I had this up to 100, then as soon as I pass my brush over, then I've got that maximum adjustment. So let's just Command Z to undo the last one. So if you keep a nice low flow, then you can really build up that adjustment until you want to stop. And that just prevents the need to then say go to a layer and play with the opacity. If you feel that it's gone too far, there's nothing to stop you then just tweaking the adjustment as well, which is kind of the same thing really in a way, Alistair. But keep the flow nice and low. You can always drop your opacity down a bit as well if you want to control it even more, and then that way we can apply our adjustment without any issues at all, without it looking fake or obvious. So if we turn this layer off, you can see before and after. And then of course, if you make a mistake, you can just press E on your keyboard to get erase. So you see with the B for brush, it's a plus in the middle of my cursor on screen now. If I press E for erase, then I get the erase brush. So I can always then erase out areas that I've made a mistake again. And as Tim very correctly says, you could also erase with a lower flow to back it off a bit. So if you think you've gone too far, then we could do exactly as Tim says, have a low flow and then just erase back away again. So same thing, Alistair, really. But I agree, would be nice to have another option for adjusting the intensity of a layer too. Could be nice to have. All right, so I think with this one, I would stop there. Doesn't need anything else. If we zoom in to 100%, let's just get the right cursor tool up. Then we can see there's a few spots which we could deal with our spot removal tool, which is in the details tool tab. You have spot and dust. Dust is for dust on the sensor. Spot is for a spot on the image itself. So we can grab our spotting tool. You can grab the edge to make it bigger or smaller. Try and keep it as small as possible, and then no one will see that you've fixed it. And there we go. So pretty simple little edit. If we have if we option click our reset button, then you can see that's before adjustments and that's after. Nothing too drastic, but nice additional options. Okay, let's go for this little hat hair fix. So I'm just going to press C on my keyboard so we've got a bit more height here. Now things like this are annoying, and it would have to be annoying to go into Photoshop and fix it, for example. But this we can also deal with really quickly with the local adjustment. Click and hold, and let's say new heel layer. Let's call this hat hair. You don't have to name your layers, of course, but saves you forgetting what they're doing. Grab a brush. So press B on your keyboard or click and hold to pick it up here. Now, if you don't select a source point, Capture One will do it for you or guess, and it won't necessarily guess in the right spot. So if we option click, I can pick where I want to copy from. So I'm going to pick here, and then we're just going to go brush, 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 and that will clean up my hat hair quite nicely. So basic stuff like that could easily be dealt with in Capture One. When we come to a later image, we'll see how we can do more extensive stuff in Photoshop quite easily, but coming back to Capture One also quite easily as well. Gilles or Gilles was asking, what's the best way to use the brush so that auto brush works well? Well, to be honest, I very rarely use auto masking. If you want to use it, then it's just a checkbox here, auto mask, and you see we now end up with 3 circles. So essentially the center circle is your sample zone. So if you're brushing, for example, or masking, so let's just make a new mask and say auto. This probably isn't the best subject, but let's try. Let's get full flow and opacity up. If we wanted to mask this black band for some reason, if I start masking, let's just press M. So you'll see when I let go, then it snaps to the edge of that black band. But it's only when I let go, like so. So the center circle is the sample zone. And then as soon as any part of the brush touches anything that differs from the sample, then you'll see it will find the edge like so. But I really don't find much of a use for it personally, but that's not to say there is no use for it. I just personally don't find myself needing to use it that much. Tim says that thread over her eyebrow. Yeah, we could probably get rid of that with the same technique as well. Bit harder as it's on a slant. So, but it may well work too. If there's time, we'll go back to that one. Okay, that was a pretty simple little exercise. So, and quite a nice improvement to what we see as well. Again, Option key, Alt key, and Master Reset allows you to see before and after, like so. Option click on the reset button in the tool itself. So that's before local adjustments and then after local adjustments. So pretty simple, before local adjustments, after local adjustments. Let's hide that mask so you can see it. So before, after. Right, next, easy. Now, sometimes with the portrait work, obviously this is what I ended up with yesterday. It's not to say it's going to look like that today. You might find that you like to use styles and presets, especially which would be more popular with Lightroom, for example, less popular with Capture One in recent years. But now, of course, we've launched style packs that you can buy from CaptureOne.com as well. And of course, other people have been selling styles or offering them for free and so on. So in 10.1, this style tool was redesigned to make it easier to use. And if you are doing portrait work, sometimes it's nice to have a bunch of styles, whether they're ones you make your own or ones that you buy to get consistency or just variety in your work as well. So let's do a workflow using a style. I'm going to go for one of the matte ones, I think. So the way it works is that when you just hover over a style, then you get an instant preview. And just because a style looks good on one shot doesn't necessarily mean it looks good on another shot. So it's nice to have a variety of different styles that we can look at. I'm going to go for number 3, I think. As soon as I tap it, it shows me up here that it's been applied. If I want to get rid of it, I can just click it again and say clear like so. So let's start with this. Now, whether you start with your style first or basic adjustments first is up to you. But again, like I said with the first image, probably doesn't make sense to throw a style on an image if the exposure is way off and the white balance is way off. Incidentally, what we try to do with our styles is not change white balance, not change any of the situational stuff or environmental factors like exposure. Everything the Capture One styles is done with curves, color editor, color balance tool, and so on, which then gives you the freedom to adjust exposure, tweak the white balance, and so on and so forth. So now we've applied our style. Of course, we can move on from there. So I might add a little bit of contrast myself. Doesn't matter that we've already got a Luma correction. We can go on top of that and add a bit more contrast. Maybe drop down saturation a little amount as well. Let's press C for crop. Let's get a better crop on there, for example. And V on my keyboard just reselects the pointer tool, so then my crop is there. You don't have to press enter to apply a crop, of course. It's just there as soon as you apply it. So that's a good start. And really, to be honest, we could stop there if we wanted to. But let's check for spotting. Now focus is almost there. So my colleague Alex took this, so I hope he's not listening, but he always does a great job. But to be honest, the fact that the focus is a little bit behind really makes no difference to this shot. But a good technique for people like me who often misfocus a bit more is also don't forget that we've got the really nice film grain tool which sits in the details tool tab. So if we bring out film grain tool just so we can see it. As I said, this is a technique I use. If the focus I've just missed a little bit, then it's kind of nice that we can just throw on film grain as well. Now, the way film grain works in Capture One is different to a lot of applications on the market that mimic film grain, in that we don't simply just overlay a scan of some film on the image and have done with that. We didn't think in testing that looked very natural. So instead, we sampled various different grain types and then built mathematical models of those grain types, which all sounds very nerdy, but the benefit to you is that the grain pattern will react to the underlying image. So it's different for shadows, midtones, highlights, and looks much more natural. So all we've got to do is pick a grain type. Let's go for soft grain. Impact is really how visible that grain is, like an opacity, if you like. And then granularity is how grainy it is. I personally don't think you'll find a better, more natural finding grain emulation on the market than Capture One. So if you haven't tried it, give it a go yourself. Incidentally, if you've done all of this and you think, you know what, this looks really great on this image, I wouldn't mind saving this as a style. Perfectly sensible thing to do. Don't forget that when you go up to the Styles and Presets tool and save a style, like so, the first dialog that you'll come to will show you everything that is part of your style. Do not disregard this and immediately click save. Because you might want to uncheck some of the things that are not kind of great to be universally applied, like the crop. We don't want that as part of our style. Like spot removal, that doesn't make sense because spots are different. Metadata, like the color tag, we don't want that as part of our style, so we should take that off. And anything else like exposure correction, contrast, that's up to you, of course. The curve we're going to have, and we've got color balance and basic color edits in there as well. So now we're safe to say save, and we can call this my fancy style, for example, and save that. And now it becomes available in the user styles area like so. So if I was to go to another image, let's go to this one, let's just reset that back to default, and then click on my fancy style, then there we go, it's applied straight away. But stuff like spotting, of course, we didn't want to affect. We haven't affected our rating, our color tag that was already there, and so on. So just bear that in mind when you're saving your own styles. And yes, Dan says to help focus, we could locally sharpen the eye on the left, which is a really good tip, and we'll look at that when we come to a more complex shot, because you can easily make yourself a sharpening brush, which we can apply at just areas of the image that we want as well. Again, if we do a option click up here, that's before and that's after, like so. Okay, so that's a couple of studio ones. What about if we didn't have the benefit of additional light, or sorry, artificial light, and we've got to deal with the light that's there? And probably no prizes for guessing that we can make use of local adjustments again. Definitely one of the more powerful features of Capture One. So no style this time, we just do some basic adjustments. So let's lift up the exposure a bit. I don't want to lift up the shadows because even though it brightens her face a bit, this then becomes, her husband, shouldn't say that, that sounded rude. The background then becomes distracting if we brighten that as well. So we really want focus on her. This is a focus on her, of course. So I'm going to lift that up a bit, add a bit more contrast, and then we're much happier with that. But the right hand side of her face, just see white balance, is it better a bit? Down a bit. The right hand side of her face is just still a bit dark. So I'll make a new layer again. Let's just call this lighten. I could invert my mask and do the trick as we did before, but I'm just going to guess probably something like that is going to help me nicely. Grab my brush, right click. I don't want auto mask. Want it a bit bigger, nice and soft, nice low flow. And then we can just see that's coming in a bit too quick. I could stop there, but you know, I'm feeling that that was a bit all or nothing at once. So I can drop my flow down even more, maybe lower the opacity, and then we can just take a bit more time in building that up. Then if I need to lighten anything else, then I can do so. But just a slight subtle lift, just to brighten up that side like so. Nothing much. Let's fix the crop. Let's say, grab the crop and do something a bit more like that. Before anything else, let's just, we've got kind of some flare here. Maybe we can accentuate that. I don't know. So let's say flare. If I grab a gradient mask and just bring that in and then lift up the shadows, does that look nice? No, I don't think so. But that's not a bad tip. If you want to make flare, just draw a gradient mask with the gradient tool, that kind of thing. And then if you just lift up the shadow point, then we can just brighten that and do a bit of fake flare, but I don't think I actually like that. So let's get rid of that. If you don't want to get into styles and you want to create your own look, then the color balance tool is a really good way to do that. If you haven't used it before, again, examine that yourself, or have a good look at how the color balance tool works. Very simple. So you've got shadows, midtones, highlights, a color wheel for each one. So this is the shadow color wheel, this is the midtone color wheel, this is the highlight color wheel. It's dead simple to use. Let's just bring this out a bit. So if we want to have cooler shadows, we just pick up the center point and drag that towards the edge. Then if we wanted to warm up our midtones or highlights, probably not. What about midtones? Then we can just move that point out. If you want to reset it at all, then you can double tap and that takes it back to 0. Quite a nice combo is to just drop the saturation down a bit, and then this gives you a bit more scope to play with that as well. Again, if you're not happy with using curves, but you want something a bit more powerful than contrast, then also don't forget, if you don't do anything with color, we can actually use the sliders on the right hand side to play with contrast as well. So if we move this slider up and down, we can darken the shadows or lighten the shadows, like so. We can brighten midtones, we can darken midtones. Again, double click to reset, and the same for highlights. We can lift highlights or we can drop highlights. So this gives you a nice way to play with contrast without knowing anything about curves, but giving you more power than the slider itself. So do check that out as well. Okay, Zeph is saying, in all these portraits the models have a lot of flyaway hairs. I know, how inconsiderate. I can see using the heel tool in local adjustments for single and small fixes, but to tidy up bigger sections, is that more of a Photoshop job? I think so. And when we get to the next shot, you'll see a nice little workflow for that. I don't think we need to do any spotting or anything. No flyaway hairs here really. I mean, tiny one there, but you're not going to notice that at normal, and we wouldn't spot out any of the natural features of our bride here as such as well. So that wouldn't make sense. Again, if we option click our reset, we can see that's how it came out of camera, and that's how it came out like so as well. That's how it looks yesterday, totally different. So same person within 24 hours, completely different adjustments as such. Just goes to show that it never looks exactly the same when it's the same person adjusting as such. But there we go. So kind of carrying on from what Zeph was asking, we're going to go up a gear and do a bit more complicated stuff. So here is, again, controlled light, studio shot. And what we're doing this one is look a bit closer what we can do in the color editor with the skin tone tab. So this is no adjustments, I think. Let me just hit master reset to make sure. So that's how it came out of camera. So totally reset. And then if we look, oh, this is 100 megapixels, so it's a bit of extreme when we zoom in. So let's back it off a bit. So if we look at our model skin tone, we can see there's a slight variation because none of us have perfect skin tone, sadly. So you can see the tone here varies a bit to here, varies a bit to here. I think her body is pretty even, but slightly different there, and so on and so forth. So if you know what you're doing in Photoshop, then of course we can bounce into Photoshop and fix all of that if we wanted to. But if you don't know much about Photoshop, and probably more importantly want to save a whole bunch of time as well, then we can do great stuff in the skin tone tab. Now, to get the best use of this, it probably makes sense to do a local adjustment mask on just the skin first. Doesn't have to be super accurate, to be honest. So who was asking that? So Gillis was asking about auto mask. So I would suggest we don't need to use the auto mask. What we want to do is make a quick rough kind of mask on just the skin tone areas. So let's go to local adjustments. We do it nice and quick. Say draw mask, make a new layer, call this skin tone. And I'm going to mask the areas that I want to equalize, if you like, make the same color. So full flow, full opacity, relatively soft. And then let's just go round like this. If we want to fill, then another handy shortcut, we can say fill mask up here in the sub menu, fill mask, that fills the hole in. Shall we do the whole body? Why not while we're here? So let's just do that. Now the skin tone is pretty different from the background, so I'm not going to worry about that too much, but let's just get a rough fill in like so. Now the only thing that I kind of don't want it to affect is potential lip color here. So what we do is just press E to get our erase brush, make that a bit smaller, and then just cut out in the middle here. So I'm doing this with a Wacom tablet. You can do it with a mouse, of course. I just don't find it as easy to do or as fast. So let's get rid of that. If I've messed up anywhere, I can always bring the brush back again and then just sketch in what I need to do, like so. Don't forget on your Wacoms, if you set it up, let's just go to System Prefs, Wacom, and the functions, you can set up the keys here to do a gazillion different things, but one of them, precision mode, might help you if you want to mask tricky stuff. So if I tap this, then it simply sends my whole tablet into one small area. So if you need to do really sort of fiddly masking, precision mode can be quite nice. Now when I sketch and draw, I tend to do big sweeping sort of edits, so that doesn't necessarily help me so much, but sometimes it's good for the really sort of tricky, fine, fiddly stuff that you need to do. So just be aware it's there if you're a Wacom user. So we've taken that away. We'll deal with the eye a bit later actually. So let's fit back to screen. So we've got our rough clown mask of all our skin. Let's press M to turn the mask off. Let's zoom in a little bit. And you can really very easily see the difference in skin tone. So I'm in my skin tone layer. So let's go to our color editor and the skin tone tab. Grab the color picker here, and now what you want to do is look at your subject and think, what is the skin tone that is the best, or that I want to be normalized to? So out of all the tones that we see here, which is the right skin tone? So I think I'm going to go for, whoops, pressed the wrong shortcut. I'm going to go for somewhere around here because it's a bit warmer. I think I like that. So if we click that, it instantly shows me my picked skin tone. That's the dot, and the range that I'm going to affect. Now remember, we've drawn a local adjustment mask, so we're pretty sure it's not going to affect anywhere else in the image. So I can expand this out like so. And we're going to use these 3 magical sliders here to normalize or equalize the color. So the way it works is that everything in this range, this selection here, the more I drag these to the right, they will be corrected to my picked color. So if I were to drag hue all the way to the right, everything in this range would be transformed to that picked color, the dot in the middle. So let's drag hue all the way across. You can see it change there. Let's drag saturation all the way across if we want. If you want it a bit more natural, you can back them off a bit. And lightness, you'll see if I drag that all the way across, we get Instagram filter effect, and now everything is the same density. So of course, use that one with caution. I'm not going to really do any of that because I think density wise it's pretty spot on. But if we now turn off that layer, you can see before, let's turn it back on, and after. Now if it's affected anywhere else, we can use the same technique as we did earlier. Let's say she had some really sort of punchy eyeshadow on. we could take our erase mask, big and soft, low flow, and then we could sort of gradually punch a hole in the mask and then just bring that back. Or if there was some blusher or whatever down here, we could bring that back and so on. But then we could start with our base point and then bring everything else out that we needed to. If we press M, of course, we can see our mask like so. So you see I've knocked out various holes like so. If that was too much, then don't forget, just take your flow right down and then we can just be a bit more subtle with it, for example, like so. So you got loads of control, but it does a really, really nice job. And yes, you could do it in Photoshop, but I honestly wouldn't know personally where to start on how to do that in Photoshop. Okay, what else can we do? Let's go to the background. Can we change the color of actually, we didn't do any other adjustments, did we? And let's just give it a little exposure lift. To be fair, it's nicely lit. It doesn't really need any adjustment. Could we change the background? Maybe. Let's use the Advanced tab, pick the background. I can see it's a very, very sort of faint, cool shade. If I expand out the entire range, maybe I can just lighten, yeah, we could lighten or darken it a bit if we wanted to. Pull up saturation, drop saturation. So if you have got a color background, you might be able to play with that a little bit. We could probably mess with the hue as well if we wanted to. So if you're not happy with your background color, or if you underlit it or overlit it a bit, sometimes the color editor can work quite nicely as well. Carl says, could the skin tone adjustments be carried to another image? Yes, you could. You could simply, if we wanted to carry it somewhere else, we would just get your donor image and the target and then shift click the up down arrow like so. But you're going to have to modify the mask, of course, but we'll look at a little workflow of that when we look at changing those backgrounds. Okay. Oh yeah, we're going to go to Photoshop, aren't we? Yes, we are. Shall we mention sharpening? Yeah, so if we want to talk about local sharpening, let's just come a bit closer. So if I go to the background and go to the sharpening tool, let's just kill all the sharpening. So everything, zero sharpening, like so. Because really, there's no point sharpening areas that aren't in focus. And this is relatively shallow depth of field. So what we could then do is go to local adjustments. We could make a new layer and we call this sharpening. Let's invert that mask. Go to our sharpening tool and then let's just apply sharpening until we think at 100%, of course. Let's apply sharpening until we think that looks nice. Let's turn sharpening off. So that's no sharpening. That's some sharpening, like so. So we can be relatively strong. That's really the only sort of super sharp areas. Bit of the hair as well. Let's turn that off and on. Okay, so now I can say invert mask back, grab a draw mask brush, and now we can simply, whoops, excuse me. Now we can simply brush in the sharpening where I want it to be. So we're going to sharpen here, we're going to sharpen up here, we're going to sharpen mouth a little bit, probably not the nose because then we see hairs. We could probably sharpen the hair a bit and so on. You get the idea. So that's just a really easy way to create yourself a sharpening brush if you want to be selective about your sharpening again. So we've done all the tasks that we want to in Capture One. Let's see, crop, let's just change the crop, like so. So now we want to go out to Photoshop. So this is a typical round trip workflow, because what we could do, as Zeph was asking earlier, we've got a bit of spotting work to do, but we've got, you know, some stray hairs and all this kind of stuff, which is not really going to be applicable to be done in Capture One. We've got an extra long eyelash there, we've got a little spot here and so on. So let's do that in Photoshop. right click, edit with, because edit with will create us an additional file. So if we say edit with, we're asked to choose between JPEG, TIFF or PSD. I'm going to go for PSD. Our color profile, resolution, scaling, and we want to open it, whoops, escape. We want to open it in Photoshop. So let's say edit variant. Capture One will process this out. It's 100 megapixels, so it will take slightly longer. Talk amongst yourselves. And once it's fully exported, then we'll see that Photoshop will open up in a second. In a second, there we go, Photoshop kicking in. So now we have our shot in Photoshop, and we want to use the tools in Photoshop to do some retouching. So I'm going to make a new layer and call this retouch layer. Retouch layer. I am not a retoucher, so don't expect any amazing retouching skills to be imparted here. Let's get the spot healing brush tool and just fix a couple of bits and pieces. So we said let's get rid of that, get rid of some stuff here. We've got the, I'm going to leave a few out so I can show you additional workflow. So let's badly retouch those, and this and this. And we've got a line here, spot there, spot there, spot there. Big. This is a good steady hand test, isn't it? A big hairline there, one there, and so on. So that will probably do. Let's just turn my retouch layer on and off, so you can see that's what we've retouched out, like so. Come on, David, do a proper job. And now we want to save this. See if there's anything down here. Oh, here we go. Let's get that, that, and so on. So now we want to save this out. So let's close this down. Do we want to save changes? Yes. Notice we've still got two layers. I haven't flattened it. So let's say save. You'll get another dialog up here. And for this to work with Capture One, we must have maximized compatibility. So this must be turned on. And let's say OK. So now if we go back to Capture One, let's just sort this by name. You'll see alongside our two raw files, our raw file and our second variant, we've now got our PSD file, like so. So there is this shot, and then this is our PSD file, like so. So if we zoom into 100%, you can see, let's just compare to this guy. I'll get them roughly in the same place, but you can see we've got our retouch fixes like so on our PSD file. But we've got a super fussy client. They don't know exactly what they want. So let's make a few variants. So let's make another variant of our PSD file. And this one, let's say we can have a black and white, because I can still work on the PSD file in Capture One if I want. So let's have a black and white. Let's clone this one, and maybe our client, they want some old school grain in there. So let's add some grain to this image as well, like so. And then finally, let's clone this one. Or new variant, won't make any difference, and let's pretend that they also want to have a color grade. So let's just mess about with the color balance tool. So now we've got our original PSD, we've got our black and white, we've got one with black and white and some grain, and then we messed around with the color balance tool and just tweaked the image a bit as well. So now if we zoom into our PSD, then our fussy client said, hang on a minute, I really don't like this eyelash. It's too long, it looks messy. So we need to go back to Photoshop and fix this. So if we right click, we're now going to say open, not edit, because we don't want to make another PSD file. We want to edit the one that we've already got. So we're just going to open this up into Photoshop like so. So this will open still with my retouch layer intact. Let's zoom into my mucky eyelash. take a spot healing brush and let's fix that badly. You'll get the idea. And fix that. Let's find, what else can we fix? Can we fix this line, for example? And this hair, and this, and we've got a little highlight there, something on the nose, bit there. So we've done some additional retouching work, mostly our eyelash going on here. Same thing as before, still got 2 layers. I don't need to flatten it. Close this down, say save. Saving. If we go back to Capture One, watch here, you'll see once it's finished saving, preview starts to rebuild and our preview is updated. But it's also updated on our black and white with grain, and our changed one with color. So there's no problem zipping back and forth between Capture One and Photoshop. So Photoshop, the ultimate plugin for Capture One, if you want to think of it like that. Is Capture One PSD support is only in 10? Yes, it's not in version 9. You can still round trip. You can still say edit with. Sorry, we can still go to our raw file and say edit with, for example. But you only have the choice of TIFF and JPEG, for example. So it's got to be in version 10 if you want PSD support, and that's 10.1. And no open with is not PSD file only, Michael. It's anything really that Capture One supports. So it could be PNG files, it could be JPEGs, it could be TIFFs, it could be anything that can be looked at in Capture One. Rosalind is saying the mask on the skin tone layer just stays on the skin tone area, or does the mask go to other adjustment layers as well? No, this is this layer, the mask here. If we press M, that's that mask. This was my sharpening mask, as you can see. Looks lovely, doesn't it? So it's a different mask per layer. And Brian, if we wanted to send this adjustment to something else, then like my skin tone adjustment, then we would have this one as I called the donor, and then our recipient, let's just pick Alex here for example, and then we could say copy and apply, and that will send those adjustments across. Except it could not apply the mask. Why is that? Oh, probably we got 2 different resolutions, so it won't scale up properly. But if we had the same resolution between the 2, then we could copy masks across. But it's very unlikely your mask is going to be exactly the same, of course, or your subject is going to be exactly the same, but it might be near enough as such to move across. Yep. Yes, it is awesome, Dan. Going back and forth and then updating all variants, that's really handy. So it does mean that some tasks you can, oops, wrong shortcut. Some tasks that if you want to leave some decision making later, then you can have your basic adjustment, black and white with grain, different color balance, and so on. Obviously, you're not working on raw data, so you would want to limit to how heavily you made adjustments, but stuff like black and white and so on works really nicely. Can we create presets including local adjustments? Not currently, no, which I know would be a good thing, Ryan. The reason why you can't is because there's various complex programming reasons why you can't. But what you could do, if you find yourself setting up various different layers like dodge, burn, help layer and so on, there's no reason why you can't just have some dummy image which has all those basic layers on, and then just copy them to other images that you want to work on as well. Okay, before we have to finish, let's have a look at the little background trick. So we've got some very handsome and attractive Phase 1 employees here, new Phase 1 employees, which have had their corporate shot done recently at the studio in Denmark. So we've got out of camera, and we've got a black and white like so. And then we've got a black and white with a fixed background, and then the standard black and white. So you'll see that we have straight out of camera, black and white with a fixed background and just a black and white as such. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this shot here, Ausra, and if we look at our white background, if we look at the numbers, it's not totally at 255. You see it's got a little bit of variation. So if we want a true white background, we can just bump that up with a local adjustment, but we can do that nice and quickly as well. So let's make a new layer, and we call this white background cleanup. And we're going to do a funky looking curve. We're going to grab the top right, pull it over here. Let's just invert my mask so you can see what's happening. We're going to pull it over here, then we're going to add a further point down there, and then to correct what's going on here, we add one roughly there, and then if you need to use your cursor keys to fine tune, then we can just do so. So that should give me a nice white clean background. As you can see, we've got 255 showing everywhere, but it has affected just the highlights like so. So we want to brush that into the shot. So let's invert that back. But now before that, I want to copy my curve and the layer to all the other shots. So nice little thing here. Imagine you've got 100 company shots to do this on. So if we right click, we can say select by same variant position. So that's number 3. So this is going to select all my number 3 variants. There we go. Nice and quick. And then I want to copy paste my local adjustment, layer and curve adjustment to all the images here. So if I shift click this, shift click the copy and apply button like so, it's now applied to everything else like so. But we want to brush it in. So I can take my brush, let's just hide the browser for a minute and probably make this a bit bigger, turn M on for mask, and then I can just do a quick, it's not going to affect her hair because that's way down in the shadows, so I can be pretty sloppy and do that. Go to the next one like so, fill that in, come around here, probably make the brush a bit bigger like so. Again, doesn't matter if I sneak into the shadows, it's not going to affect that. Probably do want to avoid that. Don't want to affect the skin. Next shot. Whoops. Again, let's just worry about the background. Like so, like so, like so. Next shot. Choose this one and fix our background like so. Again, we don't have to be particularly accurate. There we go. So 4 shots fixed. Let's press M to turn the mask off like so. And if we look at our RGB numbers, you see we got nice clean backgrounds like so with just a simple fix. So that's a lot quicker than going into Photoshop, doing some cleanup and so on. We can just use a nice basic curve like that, copy, apply that across to all the shots, and then very quickly do our local adjustments. How are we doing for time? Pretty good. Last couple of things that I will mention. Let's just go back. I don't think there was any other stuff that we needed to mention here. No, that's good. Oh, incidentally, if you're into doing headshots, company portraits, graduation stuff, school portraits, company portraits, you know, anything where you have to do mass portrait editing, have a look on blog.phase1.com. I think it will be up next week. Alex, again, at my colleague at work who shoots all the company portraits, sometimes in very long mass sessions, has got a really good workflow for doing this as quick as possible. So check out blog.phase1 next week, and then you'll be able to see the workflow for that, and also that little trick about cleaning up the backgrounds that you saw there as well. So that was a new trick which he taught me the other day, so very, very handy. So to recap, if you remember, we had just simple adjustments with a local adjustment to take down the hot areas using that invert mask trick. With Alex over here, we used a style. And remember, if you're making styles, try not to save styles with things that don't apply universally, like ratings, color tags, white balance, and so on. This sequence you saw here was the nice round trip to Photoshop, and continuing to come back to work on the PSD in Capture One. Remember, you don't have to flatten the image. So if we say open with Photoshop, we've still got our visible layers like so, and then automatically when we shut our image down, Capture One will update the preview if need be. And then finally, with a wedding shot, we just use the color balance tool to apply our own flavor. Rather than using a pre-packaged style, use the color balance tool to apply tint and play with contrast as well. George says, in the wedding shot, is it possible to remove the gnome in the shot here? You know what, I was thinking about that. It's funny, I hadn't noticed this until I think it was today. I'd never actually seen him before, but now I know it's there. It's really hard not to see. So I don't know if that would be, maybe I would just crop him out, extreme crop, then rather try and retouch him out perhaps. I'd probably end up doing that if I'm honest, but I'm not sure if there's anything we could do in Capture One to fix him. Might be a job for content aware fill in Photoshop, something like that, I would guess. Okie dokie. So I hope that was useful for those various different things. As I said, have a look out for that blog post about the workflow for the mass portraits. And it doesn't have to be for companies, anything where you've got to get a bunch of people in front of the camera in a short period of time and process them out to excuse me, various different outputs like web ready, print ready, and so on. That's going to be a really good post to follow. If you're around next week, if any of you are yet to fully come over to Capture One or still in Lightroom or Aperture or another application and exploring possibilities and enjoying the high performance of Capture One, then if you come along next week, then we'll try to talk about things that you can do to help that migration process easier. Whether that's workspace, keyboard shortcuts, knowing some terminology that's different in Capture One, then that's what we'll talk about next week. So please join me if you can. Look out for the follow-up email at some point tomorrow. It will point you towards where the recording is and also upcoming webinars in for the rest of July and early August as well. Going back to our wedding gnome, Andy suggests cropping him out and reducing the saturation. Yep, that would work. That's a good trick, actually, just playing with the color editor to get rid of distracting stuff. And Wayne says maybe it's her dad, leave him in. It could be. It could well be. Alrighty. So thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention. Hope it was useful and hope to see you all again soon. Take care.